Hi, my name is Miriam Cutelis, and I'm going to be talking about using recycled materials to innovate in your own home. And this is something that both students in elementary, as well as middle school and high school, even adults, can use in their own art. So here's a workshop from the recycling bin to innovation. I am Miriam Cutelis, and I've been teaching for 21 years. I am national board certified. I am special ed trained, and you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and I have a blog that I've been keeping for about 12 years. And I'm also an owner of a YouTube channel for art education, where I share lots of lessons, both in English and Spanish, for elementary students all the way up to adults, and also lots of ideas about rethinking art education. Why recycled materials? Why not just go to Michael's and purchase your materials? There are many cool things about recycled materials. And one of them is that we are, of course, helping the planet. There are lots of single-use plastics, for example, that we use one time and they end up in the recycling bin. And they are perfectly functioning containers. They're perfectly functioning in some other ways. In some ways, you will find these very things found in the art store. So why not use our recycling bin as our primary location of finding some of these materials? Next, using recycled materials allows you to think outside the box. So for example, if you have a collection of tabs, bread tabs, the tab that it closes your bread bag, and you collect enough of them, eventually you start thinking of them as you start thinking of them, of their use in a different way. You start thinking, how can I use these materials in other projects? And the more you kind of pull these materials from their original purpose, you will start thinking about them and using them in different ways. Next, after having worked with recycling materials for so long, it's kind of boring to work with regular materials that you buy at Michael's or your regular craft store. So I think when you start working with materials found from home, or nature materials or recycled materials, you're able to think of all these things that you can do with these materials. The opportunities for art making is much wider. I'm going to tell you a story, and it has to do with a show that when I was 10 years old, I watched on Sesame Street. And it stayed with me this whole time. And I'm a grown-up. I'm not going to share with you how old I am, but I am a grown-up. And Sesame Street had this one visitor. And every once in a while, they'll do like a little special. And this was a real child. It wasn't a cartoon. And she had this shelf. And in the shelf, she had some shoe boxes. And inside each shoe box, she had a collection of things that she had found around the home. So she would open up one shoe box and she would have toilet paper rolls. She would open up the next shoe box and she would have a collection of rubber bands. And the next one would have ribbons from all the presents from the year, from all her family, and so on. So you get my point, right? So I was fascinated. That entire show stayed with me for so many years. And when I became a grown-up, I looked for ways to recreate that, not only in my own art studio, but also in my classroom. And I have used that format, or that way of thinking, of using these collected materials to make art throughout my entire career. And it's interesting that this one show did this for me, and I'm hoping that my video will do the same for you. First, let's talk about how you might start to organize your materials. The first thing I'm going to offer is to make an inventory. An inventory is just a list of things that you in your own home might collect. And of course, everyone has different things that they buy often. And so if my family buys a lot of yogurt all the time, then obviously I will have yogurt cups available to me. But if your family has, let's say, like my mom, she would buy chicken all the time in that tray that the chicken comes in. That might be something you could wash and collect. And those make for great palettes and sculptures and so on. So the first thing you have to do is kind of walk around your home and or even look in your recycling bin and see which one of those things, once cleaned out, can be used for other things. Now, if you still don't have any idea of how these can be used, don't worry, because we're going to cover that very soon. The next thing you're going to have to do is start collecting shoe boxes. You might want to talk to your friends, your family members, your grandparents to help you collect shoe boxes, because you're going to need somewhere to put your collection. I also recommend jars. There are plastic and glass jars that, once cleaned out, make for great containers to collect things. The next thing you're going to want to do is start labeling them. And I suggest either writing on the container or maybe writing on a piece of paper and taping that onto the container so that you know what items are in each container. Now, depending on how much you have, you need to figure out how big the box or the container needs to be. So if you only have a couple, let's say 100 bottle caps, you might just want to use a shoebox. But let's say you have thousands of bottle caps from, let's say, a collection you did in the community, you might now start collecting each color in a different box. So again, it all depends on how much you have of something that will determine what kind of container you will need. Now let's talk about what kinds of things you can collect. First, let's talk a little bit about the materials. Once you meet a material, there are things that you need to ask. For example, what can it do? Here, for example, this is a metal cover that comes on the top of a coffee container. And when I peel it out, you normally just throw it in the trash. But I noticed that when I folded it, it actually stood up. And I realized, you know what? This is not only cool and shiny, but it's also bendable, and I can create something with this. So you can create a sculpture, you can cut pieces of it and glue it onto another sculpture. You can use it for different things, but the fact that it's bendable makes it very easy material to work with. So that's the kind of thinking that you need to have when you're doing your inventory. Another thing is, I need you to pull the material away from what it was originally meant to be. So for example, here are some tangerine covers, and also the other one I think is from my onion bag. If you pull it away, so now it's no longer that, and just play with the material and look at it and see how this material could either be stretched, pulled, cut into pieces, and what you could possibly use for it in your own art. Now, just looking at this offhand, I could tell that the mesh material could be easily used to, I was thinking if you use spray paint and you spray paint over it, and it would leave a cool design on the mat, on the canvas or the paper. You can also, if you're making mini houses, you could use them to make a hammock. Or if you're going fishing, you can create your own fish net. These are just some ideas. Again, you got to pull it away from its original purpose, and now you are looking at it in a different way. Here's another example. I have these peppers that come in a bag, and I don't know why they do that, but they are mixed peppers and they come in this bag. And when you take the bag away, the bag is actually see-through. And not only that, but it's clean. I don't have to wash it. And then I cut it up into pieces, and now I can use these materials to create windows in a mini house, maybe. Or if I were to create a model of an insect, the material could be used as wings, and you just draw the lines that would be on the wings normally. So here are some other ideas for collections. You can collect soda caps, you can collect them all together, or you can separate them depending on how many you have. I love to collect bread tabs, which are the ones on the top right. You can also collect seashells if you're near the beach, or if you visit the beach, you can collect rocks and little pebbles. And you can also collect old toys or broken jewelry. I like to collect broken jewelry and make new jewelry from it. So there's all these different possibilities. Again, the important thing is to keep them organized and to keep them separated so that you can easily find them when you need them. Marker tops are also great manipulatives, and they're so colorful and beautiful away from its marker, and on its own I've used them for all kinds of things. One year we made puppets, and the kids used matching tops on each side of their puppets to make the arms. Some other things you can collect are plastic and styrofoam egg containers. I cut them in half because I only use 6 colors, and I'll get to that later. But I cut my palettes in half and stack them, and then I use them whenever I need to paint an art project. I always collect paper towel tubes, and toilet paper tubes because they are just so much fun to work with. There are so many things you can do with them. Then my other favorite thing to collect is oatmeal containers. I'm very lucky. I'm married to a person who is obsessed with oatmeal. And so every week we have a new container. And by the end of the year, I have so many of them. They're sturdy, they're clean, and I can make lots of really interesting projects with them. One year, we actually had each child create part of a totem, and we would combine them together to make a big totem, and I put them all over the school. Magazines are one thing I use a lot of. I use them for images, for collages, mosaics, and you can also collect, again, yogurt cups and coffee cups. Also, as you see at the bottom there, snack cups. A lot of those one-time snacks are also great because they're easily washed and you can stack them, and then you can use them for either painting, one-time painting experience, or you can create a project out of those. There are certain things that I think everyone should have for any kind of art studio that you might be running. And a must-have materials, which I think are very, very important, are masking tape. Now, I think every child needs to have a roll of masking tape every time they want to make art because it is so flexible. It adheres to plastic, to cardboard, to paper, to metal. So it's a very versatile material, and it really helps increase a child's imagination to have this one material. And not to also mention fine motor. The next thing I think every art studio or home studio needs to have is 6 colors of tempera paint. If you're familiar with my YouTube channel, I have a video on there that is about the science of color and how you can use these 6 colors to make up to 39 different new colors. So it's very important to know that you don't need to go out and buy purple or orange or all these different colors, that you only need ultimately these 6 colors. You can make secondary colors, you can make tertiary colors, you can make lighter and darker versions of every one of those colors. So go watch my video, but before that, just go and get these color paints. So when you're making a project at home or in your art studio or in school, you can easily make it look a lot more professional and make it look more like a finished product when you finish adding the paint. Now, I'm going to be sharing a couple of ideas of things that I've done with my students in my own work, in my own artwork. And I want you to think of these as ideas that you can grow from. You are welcome to copy the ideas, but I more want to encourage you to use these ideas as a springboard to search in your own head what ideas you would like to explore. One year we made recycled puppets with my kindergarten kids. We started with a head, making the puppet head, and we made a puppet head using newspapers. And then we used, again, masking tape. And it was really difficult for 5-year-olds to manage masking tape. But after about 2 classes of working with masking tape, their fine motor skills with the masking tape increased many times over. Then we used a container, like a cylinder or a coffee cup or a yogurt cup for the bottom. We attached the head of the puppet to the back of the cup this way. We then painted them with the skin tones, and notice they're imperfectly perfect. And they're all different heights because, of course, the cups are all different types of cups. Then we dress them with tissue paper wrapped around the body, and then we cut some yarn and attached to the top of the head in order to create hair. Once that was dried, the kids were able to then give their puppets a haircut to have the length that they wanted. Here are some examples. I'm sorry for the repetitions. I just wanted to show you a close up. And then here are some examples of class projects. So notice how different each one of these are and how just completely adorable they are. Notice some of these materials have ribbons. These are donated ribbons from the families. Some of them have buttons. Some of them have containers that were from a Play-Doh. And so a lot of these, again, are donated materials that once used in a different way, it's just so much more exciting than if I were to purchase something. I mean, what is equivalent to those yellow hats that I could purchase at Michael's? There isn't any. So in reality, it's like it just brings a uniqueness level to your artwork that you cannot get from buying those materials from a store. Here is another class project. Notice some of those Easter eggs being used as hats, and Mardi Gras beads being used as hair decorations. Another idea of something to do is shoebox homes, using some of those materials, especially a shoebox, for example, to create homes. I want you to notice here how the table has some plates, and the plates are actually just these white soda caps. You can use them bottle tops of all kinds, or even marker tops, to help you with manipulatives and have children create all kinds of designs and images of things that they are familiar with using these materials. So now we're going to talk about how we come up with ideas. I think it's important that as an artist, you also think of yourself as a researcher. Here, for example, I took second grade students on a nature walk, and we picked things that we found on our nature walk that we would like to further explore or draw or analyze in the classroom. I then backed them with paper and we brought them to the classroom. And we started to look at these things a little bit closer. A lot of the kids, before we did this, were already collecting things and putting them in their pockets because they were interested in them. Here we are using magnifying lenses to look closer at the specific lines and designs. There on the top left, you will see one of the lenses. And notice that looking at nature creates these drawings that are very dynamic, that are very unique. And we can then use these drawings to create sculptures, create prints, create drawings. And one other thing I wanted to mention from this photo is that every researcher or every artist should really have a sketchbook in which to write down or draw their ideas, because all art that you see on a wall in a museum all started with an idea and that somebody sketched it out somewhere. So if you want to start being an artist or a researcher, it's important that you get yourself a sketchbook and you start saving some of your ideas in there so that you can start playing with those ideas. I want to also start talking about this project that we began doing with the students. We went outdoors, and one thing I noticed was that they were very, very interested in the insects that they found on a bush outside of our school. And I couldn't pull them away. And so a lot of times as teachers, if we really want to have the kids feel engaged in the work, we listen to what they're excited about. So in this case, I really wanted to follow this excitement and kind of feed it and see where it takes us. And it took us to bees. They were very excited about bees. So we started making beehives. We explored the how to make a beehive, and the students started making individual beehives. And once they started making more and more, we realized that we can combine our individual beehives to make a larger beehive. They also used recycled materials such as newspaper, painted newspaper, and taped with, again, masking tape to create these bees. Now, for the wings, again, we used some of those plastic materials that I talked about earlier, and we used wire, which you can find, again, as a bread tab. A lot of those ties, the wire ties, those would make great insect legs. So here we are, full excitement. The entire class is buzzing. Don't mind the pun. And we ended up making, here are some other images. Everyone is so excited. And that is our final product with the writing and some pictures. Each individual child made their own bee. They all participated together to make the beehive. I actually have a video about this whole process on my YouTube channel if you're interested in looking. All of this is used with recycled cardboard that was being tossed out in the trash, and newspaper and masking tape and paint. So those are the materials that we used for this specific project. I think you're getting to where I'm going here, which is you follow what you're excited about, what you love. As an artist, as a researcher, you follow what makes you excited. And so I'm going to continue on that, and I'm going to talk about piñatas. So one year we made piñatas with second grade, and we used recycled materials. We used all those oatmeal containers I talked about earlier. And every child started with their sketches of their piñata. And as would be expected, every child drew the things that made them excited about life, made them excited in general. And here is a child who had a military vehicle, and he made it come to life. Not only that, but he was able to get a couple of friends who were also excited about this idea. And so they made this military vehicle piñata, which I think is fabulous. And I want to add in here that had I said we're going to all make a cat piñata, I would say I would lose half of them. So it's a really, really important that the artist is always the driver of the ideas. Here is another student making a piñata, again, using my oatmeal containers from home. And the part at the bottom where the flames would shoot out of were these yogurt cups, which I thought was an excellent idea. What an excellent idea. Again, none of these products you can go and just purchase at Michael's. This is a unique opportunity that only recycled materials can bring you. Face reliefs. Here are some other ideas of what you can do with recycled materials. One of the things that I work with kindergarten is recognizing your face and part of the face, and how there are two identical eyes, and then we have hair, and we have nose, and where's our mouth. And I have just a giant box of different recycled materials from, as you can see, empty tape roll, bottle caps and beads and straws. And the kids just run away with it. Look at all these faces and how different they are. So this takes a couple of days to do. But again, this is something you can do in your own home if you're a child, middle school, high school, a grown person. It is so much fun to do this. And you can make it as simple as you want or as intricate as you want. It doesn't matter. The backs to these, by the way, are cardboard. Some of them are oddly shaped, and that was an intentional thing. When I cut them, sometimes I cut them different shapes so that students can choose the shapes that they want for their faces. And here are some recycled material sculptures. I do get a lot of Corks donations, and I do get a lot of sort of ends to games or puzzle pieces. The important thing to remember when you're doing a recycled material sculpture is its ability to glue together. You are going to need liquid glue, not now. The important thing is some things will not work with liquid glue. So if you're going to make a sculpture, do not use plastic at all, because once it dries, it will just fall off. So everything that you use should either be paper or cardboard or fabric. So those kinds of materials will stick together. If you use plastic at all in this type of sculpture with Elmer's glue, it is going to fall off the minute it dries. So it will look like it's going to stay, but it's not. So make sure, and corks too. Corks, as you see, it has it's porous, means that it has tiny little holes in it that allow the glue to then grab onto it and it won't fall off. So cardboard, paper, fabric, yarn, any kind of fabric-y material is porous and will grab on. I am big on collecting wall calendars because when I teach students landscape painting, I do need them to have an image to look at. And sometimes the iPad is not really that easy to access because it will shut down, you have paint on your hands, it gets dirty. And so that's not really easy. So I do collect quite a bit of wall calendars, tear the page off, and then laminate it so that kids can pick the one they want. So over several years, I've had boxes and boxes of laminated landscape material. Here are some examples of how students are utilizing the calendar images for landscape material. Next, I did this project with my students because I had a lot of business cards. I was a wedding photographer for many years, and I had a lot of ads that I never passed out. And they are perfect because they're all exactly the same size and they're fun to work with. I wanted to touch base on one idea before I demonstrate this example. And it's calling Scratch That Itch. And what would happen if? Making art is kind of like scratching that itch. So if you see something, you said, what would happen if I put these together? Making art is a process of answering that question for yourself. So in this case, I wanted to know what would happen if I took my wedding business cards to work and just let the kids work with them and notice how incredibly different these sculptures are from each other. Having this opportunity to answer that question for yourself is art making. I always think of it, scratch that itch and make sure you do. It's like it's driving you crazy until you get it done. Making art is very much like finding out what's really going to happen and answering that question for yourself. Magazine collages. I do collect a lot of magazines. What I often will do is have the kids initially cut out colors from magazines. Like if there's a large page with mostly one color, I will have them cut that out and then sort them into boxes. And then we cut them into squares to make collages. This is a collage that was made on a 24 by 36 frame for a auction that we did, and each child then also created a bird from various images of birds, and then we glued them on top, and this was auctioned off to families. Meat tray printmaking. If you're like my mom, we had chicken or meat pretty much every night, so I was very familiar with the meat trays. And when you wash those out, they are very sturdy. So there it is, a picture of one on the top right. And if you use a pen to carve into them, they become very useful in the printmaking art room. Sometimes those trays are yellow, sometimes they're white. You can then put paint on top and flatten them on another piece of paper, and you get interesting prints. Cork and styrofoam stamps for printmaking. So I did this only a couple of times. It was like a weird coincidence where I had a lot of corks and I also had a lot of styrofoam sheets, and the kids made parts of buildings and then they would use those in separately to create architectural designs. In this case, you can use ink or you can use tempera paint it onto your stamps. The corks themselves were the handles, and you would need a hot glue gun to connect the entire thing together. So on the top right, you will see examples of what the stamps look like. This is something I think every family should definitely do. I, as a grown-up, actually enjoy doing this myself. So using a lot of those recycled material tops, dip them in paint and then print them onto paper. And the results are just beautiful and stunning. You can make some that are very simple, like not overlapping, or you can make some that are, you can also let it dry and come back the next day and set another layer of colors on top and just keep going. So it's really a lot of fun for any artist at any age. Stencils. One year we looked at how to make stencils. Somehow I got permission to be able to use spray paints outside in the playground on these large canvas boards that we had created. And so the kids were able to pick words that meant something to them, and then were able to use scissors to cut out their stencil. And then we spray painted these stencils onto a canvas that then hung in the school for many years. Cardboard printmaking, very easy. These are actually cardboard from like a cereal box. And then the yellow cardboard is from like those manila envelopes that you might file your bills in. So all kinds of cardboard are available to us at all times if we just open our eyes. The cereal box, the pasta box, there's all kinds of cardboard available at all times. Jewelry using bread tabs. So here's some of my art I want to share. So I have collected bread tabs, as you can see, and I have made some earrings from them, not the ones I'm wearing, but the ones on the screen. And then I also decided I'm going to connect them to make a necklace, which I thought came out pretty good, and I'm very proud of those two creations. Again, these are plastics in which the colors do not fade. So over time, these are going to always be bright and cheerful and colorful. You can also cut them in smaller pieces and maybe create mosaics. Again, remember, Elmer's glue and plastic do not mix. So in this case, if you are going to be gluing them onto something, it needs to be with a glue that's much more powerful. And I would suggest tacky glue, which is that gold bottle that's sometimes kind of expensive. But if you water it down a tiny bit, you can have it last a little longer. But tacky glue for sure when you're gluing plastics. So I use torn cardboard in a lot of my paintings. I'm obsessed with texture and how to create texture in my work, in my own artwork. So here I have an example of what the textured collage looks like. The canvas itself is an old painting that I made a really long time ago, and I didn't want to go out and buy another canvas. So I went ahead and just used it. So that's why it's red. I didn't paint it red recently, but it's from the old painting. I went ahead and cut the cardboard. Some I tore, some I cut a specific shape, and then I glued them. And I didn't really know when I started where I was going to go with this, but as I started doing it, I was able to make decisions about my work. Then once that all dried, a couple of days later, I went ahead and painted it. And it took several days to do because I do use time in my work, which is I do let things dry and then add layers. I really like layers. So, and I did want it to make it look like there were several layers going on in my work. So here's a before and after photo of how you can use recycled canvases, but also recycled cardboard in your work to create art. Here is an example of how to use old business cards to make, again, texture in paintings. This is another example of my work. And on the left, you see a close-up of how I glued not only cardboard, but the business cards in different ways. And I went ahead and on the right, you see an image of the finished product once painted. Now I think it's your turn to innovate. And I want you to, just for us to get started, I think it's important to just try it out. So before you start your collection, before you start canvassing your friends and family and neighbors to help you collect things, I want you to just try it out. And I see how much fun it is. And I think you'll be won over. So my idea for a challenge is to go and collect a couple of rolls of toilet paper tubes or paper towel tubes. You can go and search in your recycling bin for either cereal boxes or pasta boxes. I generally go for those two because they're nice and easy to cut for small hands. But even for myself as a grown up, I don't like to cut thick cardboard. So if you have business cards, of course, you can use that. Markers and tape and scissors. So I want you to just go and find these items and work on making something with these items. Of course, you can use other materials you might have and see what you can come up with. I hope that my video was inspiring you to think outside the box in ways that you can use your recycling bin as a source of inspiration. And I cannot wait to see what you make. Everything that you make, you can feel free to share on social media. If you hashtag it with cutelisart, CUTELISART, I will definitely see it. So please feel free to share your work with me. I'm very excited to see it. And on that note, I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you are inspired to now inspire you to innovate and create artwork that inspires others, but especially you. See you later.